Today on Sugar Spun Run, I'll be showing you how to make a Chantilly cake. Hey Sugar Spun Bakers, Sam here, and today I am so excited to be sharing another carefully tested, well-researched, and perfected recipe. Now there are many recipes for Chantilly cakes out there. Mine is, of course, my personal favorite. It has 3 layers of super soft and moist vanilla cake. It has a very light whipped cream-like frosting that has tons of flavor but isn't too sweet. And it has a homemade berry jam filling. I think you're going to absolutely love this one, so let's go ahead and get started. Before we begin, make sure to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Now for today's cake, we are not going to be using the traditional creaming method that you're probably super familiar with, where you cream the butter and sugar together. Instead, we are going to be using the reverse creaming technique, which means we're going to start by combining all of our dry ingredients and our sugar in a large bowl. You'll need 2 2/3 cups of all-purpose flour, 1½ cups of granulated sugar, 1/2 cup of firmly packed light brown sugar, a teaspoon of baking powder, a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and a teaspoon of salt. Now we'll stir these ingredients together until they are completely combined. And the next thing you're going to need is 12 tablespoons or 1½ sticks of unsalted butter. Now this butter should be softened, but it shouldn't be so soft that it's melty. We are going to be adding this butter to our flour mixture 1 tablespoon at a time. Now for best results, you are really going to want to use either a stand mixer or an electric hand mixer for this recipe. We'll add our first tablespoon of butter, and then we are just going to stir, and we are not going to add the next tablespoon until the first is completely combined. The mixture is going to kind of become a bit like wet, coarse sand as we continue to add the butter. Now this is the reverse creaming technique that I was telling you about. By adding the butter this way, the end result is usually a much softer cake, and unlike many cakes made with a creaming method, it is much harder to accidentally overmix the batter, which means you're much more likely to end up with a very soft cake. Now make sure you have patience when you're adding your butter. You don't want to add it too quickly. I find I'm about 10 to 15 seconds between tablespoons. All right, this is looking good. You don't see any really large clumps of butter in here. The mixture is like a coarse, damp sand. This is perfect. So we'll just set this aside. And now in a large measuring cup, I'm going to combine 1½ cups of buttermilk. And if you don't have buttermilk or you can't find buttermilk, I will make sure to leave you a link to my super easy buttermilk substitute. We're going to add 2 large eggs in with the buttermilk, and 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract. Now just whisk these together because you want to make sure the egg yolks, the eggs in general, are well broken up, and you want this mixture to be well combined. Now with your mixer on low speed, we'll just gradually add this buttermilk mixture into the flour mixture. And we'll just keep adding it until we've added all of that buttermilk mixture. And then we'll increase the speed and just keep mixing this batter until it is smooth and silky. Let's take a look at this with our spatula. You want to make sure everything is totally combined. You don't want to have any clumps hiding on the edges or at the bottom of your cake batter. This looks perfect, so now we're going to divide it into 3 8-inch cake pans. Now you just want to lightly grease these with baking spray. You want to make sure you get the sides really well. And then because I do not want to risk the cake bottoms sticking to the bottom of the pan, I always use parchment rounds. This is going to ensure the cakes come out nice and clean. Now we'll just evenly divide the batter into these pans. And if you have the room to bake all 3 of these cake pans in your oven at the same time, you can certainly do that. Make sure your oven bakes evenly, or you may have to rotate them. But if you don't have enough room, you can just bake 2 of them. The other one will be fine sitting on the counter until the first 2 are finished baking. When I bake all 3 of these cakes at the same time, I find that it typically takes about 22 to 25 minutes for them to bake completely. Now, while those cakes are baking, let's go ahead and make our homemade berry jam filling. Now, this is super easy to make. We're going to be making this on the stovetop. You're going to need a small saucepan, and we're just going to add a 1/3 cup of granulated sugar and 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. And I just like to whisk these together before we add anything else. That way we don't have any clumps that we have to worry about. Now for your berry filling, if you want to use a specific type of berry, like just strawberries, that would be totally fine. I am using a blend of mixed berries, strawberries, blackberries, and blueberries. There may be some raspberries in here as well. You can use fresh or frozen berries. Today I'm using frozen berries. Pull these out of the freezer. They have a lot of ice on them. We are going to use them anyway. They should be fine. Frozen berries are pretty hardy. Next, we'll add 3 tablespoons of water. Because of all that ice in there, we probably could get away with a little bit less, but any excess water is going to cook out, so I'm not too worried about it. We'll also add 1.5 tablespoons of lemon juice. Now stir everything together until it's combined. And we'll turn our stovetop to medium heat, and we are going to stir pretty frequently while these cook until the berries begin to release their juices and the mixture starts to thicken. Now, once everything starts to thicken like it's doing here, it may even start bubbling. I like to mash the berries. I don't like to have any discernible pieces of berries. So you could use a potato masher. Today, I'm just using a fork because that's what I happen to have handy. I'm just mashing any large pieces of berry. Now continue to cook, stirring until this is thickened to a jam-like consistency. Now you don't want to go so far that it becomes like a paste because this is going to thicken even more as it cools. I'm really happy with how this consistency looks here. So let's remove it from the heat and pour it into a heat-proof dish where we're going to let it cool completely. All right, while your jam filling is cooling, let's get back to those cakes. They should be finished baking any minute now. And when they're finished baking, you want to make sure that a toothpick inserted in the center comes out clean or preferably with a few moist crumbs. Let the cakes cool in the baking pans for about 10 minutes, and then I like to run a knife around the edges just to loosen them, and then carefully invert them onto a cooling rack where they will cool completely before you assemble and frost them. And see, thanks to that parchment, they come out nice and clean. You definitely do not want to assemble and decorate this cake until the cakes have cooled completely. You'll notice that these cakes don't get super golden or dark in the oven. They stay pretty pale. That's totally normal and expected. All right, let's make one of my favorite parts of this whole cake, which is the Chantilly frosting. Now, a true Chantilly cream is just a sweetened whipped cream. We are going to be taking this a step further because we're going to be adding cream cheese and mascarpone cheese. It's going to be rich, but it's not going to be overly sweet. I think you're going to love this one. It's one of my favorite frostings. Now, using a stand mixer like I'm using or an electric mixer, we're going to combine 2.5 cups of cold heavy cream, 1.5 cups of powdered sugar, and 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Now I have fitted my stand mixer with a whisk attachment. I am going to beat this just until I have just barely reached stiff peaks. I actually like to stop just before I reach stiff peaks. All right, let's take a look at this. So you can see I have a peak here with my cream. It's not falling off the spatula, it's not too loose, but it's not super thick and fluffy like I usually like my whipped cream to be. We are going to stop right there, set this aside for now. And in a separate bowl, we are going to combine 8 ounces of softened full-fat cream cheese and 8 ounces of mascarpone. Now the mascarpone has softened as well, but my cream cheese I've had out for over an hour at this point, and the mascarpone I only like to sit out for about 20 to 30 minutes maximum. It still has a little bit of a chill to it. This is a 16-ounce container, so I'm just going to be adding half of that in with my cream cheese. We're also going to add 1/2 cup of powdered sugar. Now this is kind of a small bowl. I'm going to use my electric mixer in a second, but I don't want this powdered sugar to go everywhere. So I'm just going to try to begin stirring these ingredients together. Since they're pretty soft, they're starting to come together. But now I'm going to switch to my electric mixer and just briefly beat these ingredients together until they're smooth. Now, anytime you are beating mascarpone, you want to be careful because if you overdo it, the mixture is going to become grainy. So we're just going to go until things are completely combined. All right, this is perfect. So let's grab our mixer back and we are going to add this cream cheese mascarpone mixture in with our whipped cream. All of that in there. Now I'm going to stir this briefly on low to medium speed. And then I'm just going to pause real quick, make sure I scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl, try to get out any of this stuff that's clumped in the whisk. And we can slowly increase our speed to high, and we're going to beat until we have thick, fluffy frosting. You should have stiff peaks. Again, don't overdo it or you can end up overbeating your mascarpone. So this frosting is perfect at this point. It is thick and fluffy. It kind of resembles a buttercream. It's not weepy, it's not liquidy, it's going to frost our cake perfectly. So as long as your cakes are cooled and your jam has cooled, let's go ahead and assemble everything. We'll start with our first layer of cake. And what I've done here is I have placed my frosting in a piping bag that's fitted with a large open tip, and I'm just going to pipe a ring around the cake. This is a dam that's going to hold our jam filling inside. Now we'll layer half of that jam filling right inside the dam. You want to make it nice and even. We'll top with another layer of cake. Be careful, I almost broke that one. These are really, really soft, moist cakes, which I love because they basically melt in your mouth, but also because this cake really requires refrigeration. You can't leave it out at room temperature. I wanted a cake that was super moist. That way, even though it had to sit in the fridge wouldn't be able to totally dry it out. So it's really good even after it's been refrigerated a few days. I will repeat that buttercream dam. Use the rest of our jam and add our final layer. Let's use up the rest of that frosting. All right, now I'm not a cake decorator, but let's get this thing iced. And this recipe does make a good bit of frosting. It makes enough so you can still decorate the top. I am just gonna put the rest into this piping bag that I fitted with an Attico 848 tip, which is my favorite tip. And we'll just do a couple swirls on top. Now, Chantilly cake should really be adorned with fresh berries. Today I am using some strawberries that I just picked this weekend. All right, let's go ahead and dig in. I can't wait for you to see this beautiful cake. And that is how you make my new favorite cake. I'm hoping it is one of your new favorites as well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. I'm so excited for this. It's so soft. You've got to try this one.